Hey everyone, welcome to the panel talk from AAA co-development to in-house development. My name is Shawn and joining me today is Shahrizar Roslan from Kaigan Games, Hasnul Hadi Samsudin from Sony Interactive PlayStation, Stefan Baier from Streamline Studios, and Hazmer from Metronomik.
Hey.
I'm gonna let all these guys introduce themselves, starting from Shahrizar before we move on with the panel. So Shah, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Shawn. Pleasure to be here. So yeah, I'm Shahrizar, CEO of Kaigan Games based in Malaysia. So we make mobile horror games mostly. So the IPs that we're well known for are called Sarah is Missing, Simulacra, and the most recent co-production that we did was with BBC and Mace Theory for Doctor Who, The Lonely Assassins. Yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
Hey, hi. Thanks, Shah. Hi, my name's Hasnul. Thanks for inviting me. I'm the head of the studio for PlayStation Studios Malaysia, probably the newest kid on the block. But before that, I was part of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation as the vice president of the digital content division. And even before that, Rhythm and Hues, where we did visual effects. I'm now very excited to build a studio here in Malaysia, featuring Malaysia talents.
Okay, then move on to Stefan.
Hey everyone, my name is Stefan. I am the CEO of Streamline Media Group. We have an office in Malaysia as well as in the US and a presence in Europe. Roughly speaking, around 200 developers, creatives around the world. And we specialize in, well, 20 years, honestly, this is our 20 years anniversary this year. We focus on art production, co-development, engineering, design, and full products. And we have our largest development office right now in Malaysia, so I'll be speaking to that.
Thanks, Stefan. And lastly, of course, Hazmer.
Congrats on the 20th anniversary, by the way, Stefan. My name is Hazmer. I am co-founder and CEO of Metronomik. We make original IPs that aim to integrate rhythm or music and game design. We released No Straight Roads recently, which was out for PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and also the PC. I used to work in Japan. I used to work in Square Enix. I was lead game designer for Final Fantasy 15, Monster of the Deep Final Fantasy 15, and also game designer for Final Fantasy Type 0. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys. I mean, it's a real pleasure to talk to you guys here, and from your resume, of course, it's really accomplished, and I'm really privileged to be talking to you guys. And there's a lot to learn from today's topic, and I'd just like to start off with we're talking about transitioning from doing co-development or outsourcing work to creating your own IP, and that's something that's really exciting. But with excitement comes quite a lot of risk. So the first question is, how do you make that decision to invest in building your own IP when you've already had such a established and steady cash flow coming from your original business of doing co-development? Like, how do you justify this? How do you justify this big risk of taking 2 to 3 years of just focusing on developing your IP? So this question, I'd like to maybe direct it to Stefan first.
Sure. I mean, and please, interject if you guys have something to add, so it's not just me monologuing for a couple minutes here, because it is, I think, an important question, right? Like, why go for the risky venturing of building your own, creations, which takes a lot longer than the safe route of doing services? That is maybe something people are asking. The truth is, right now, this wasn't always the case that services were considered much safer than products, or at least kind of like, more profitable. This is really only the last few years where this has become so firmly established, right? When we started in Streamline 20 years ago, there wasn't even a term for outsourcing, right? So it wasn't really, it wasn't always just a safe bet. So looking at where we are now going, the stuff that we have, a natural business progression means that you need to actually evolve your business, and, looking at having a team that is growing as independents, growing as being creative, and having ownership in what they're producing isn't something that will just naturally happen when you're doing services. Services is like you're getting like a list of content, produce this, and then move on to the next project. That is great for a certain type of person, but not necessarily for growing your overall capability. It's actually evolving as a studio, right? And so for us, actually the progression towards making products, every about 5 years, we're going to be making a product, and that is now accelerating further because to looking at where the market is going. You see this with automation tools. You see this with kind of like what Unreal Engine is doing with all of the meta-humans. You see this with how textures are being created. The way that we used to do technology is completely different from where it is now. So if you don't evolve as a studio, don't rely on just making props and how you're doing things. Shahrizar is also a visitor. That's hilarious. If you don't move your business towards these higher value services, at one point you're going to be automated away, right? And business always keeps moving surrounding you. So if you don't want to lean into the creative energies of your people, you're kind of holding your business back at one point, right? So for the 5 business divisions we're having, we've actually always encouraged them to move towards a higher value kind of collaborations, right? Like this is why we transitioned pretty quickly out from doing basic art services to, working with game designers, level designers, on projects, like Lord of the Rings, or working with the Oddworld Soulstorm guys and producing, things there, or helping to ship Final Fantasy 15. This is kind of like what you have to do. I don't necessarily think this is honestly the time and place anymore to build a pure art production studio. At least it isn't for us, right? So that's one reason. The other reason I think is that, it makes sense from a business perspective to evolve into further products when you see that your own clients are coming to the country to do the outsourcing of the art services for you, right? Like the visual art service group and things like this that obviously now Hasnul is running. That is work that usually was done by studios in the country. Now they're taking that in-house, right? So let me focus on work that is higher value than that. So that's kind of the rationale there. And it is also, like you can balance the risks, right? Like doing like 50-50, right? You do some services and then you do internal products. You don't have the risk of going to investors at that moment. You don't have the risk of immediately going to publishers. You can take some risks, and honestly, you need to be able to cancel internal projects. And at this point, I think most of our games that were prototyped, more have been canceled than released. And that's kind of like, it's not nice to say, but it's kind of, I think, how it has to be. So for our perspective, learn, and be independent, working on the projects for other people, and then apply that knowledge and those funds on your own products as much as you can. That does require a certain scale, but otherwise, you're going to be fine.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, I can totally understand having to kill your products, internal projects a lot. I think personally I've done that. But I think Hazmer, starting his first studio, hasn't actually killed a project of his own yet. So moving to Hazmer, actually, before Hazmer started his studio Metronomik, he was actually working on Final Fantasy 15. And part of the work at FF15 was outsourced, co-developed with Streamline. So maybe you can tell us more about that, Hazmer?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, the trigger as to why I opened Metronomik partly was also thanks to Streamline Studios. The main reason being that I actually met them, I forgot where, I think it was Tokyo Game Show back in 2015, I think. And that was the time I met with Alexander, right? At the time I was in Japan for already around 7 years. And I was, trying to get Final Fantasy 15 finished because it took quite a while. And when I met Streamline Studios, they gave me the opportunity to actually go to Malaysia and be based in their office, actually in Bangsa South. During my time in Streamline Studios, I actually noticed that Malaysia has so much potential, and I had a lot of government support compared to when I left for Japan back in 2008. So I was thinking of, trying to give back to the country. And that's how I told myself that I wanted to start my own company in Malaysia. I've always wanted to do that, but I don't know where. But Malaysia seems to be the best place. Yeah, Streamline Studios, wow. Such a big powerhouse. Malaysia seems to have this imagery that, we are very left behind when it comes to technology. Or when it comes to know-how in terms of game development. But when you step into Streamline's office, it's a totally different story altogether, yeah.
So even now, because there's nobody there.
Well, that is kind of being in the now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate it though. Thank you.
No problem. Obviously it's not just 2015, right? There was so many effort that led to that. And to me, I think just like Metronomik as well, Streamline, I think, has gone a long way. For Metronomik, it's more about my experience in Square Enix, my cousin's experience with Capcom, because he was the concept artist for Street Fighter V as well. So all that experience piled up, working for other people, has given us enough know-how to make our own IP. So yeah, I think Streamline Studio is going in the right direction when it comes to making like Big and Switch and all that. And for Metronomik, is the same thing as well. And that's how we have the confidence to actually make our own IP.
Yeah, there's a big difference when you're doing internal projects. That big gap, and sorry, this is a question somewhere else, but it fits here, I guess. That gap of knowledge isn't maybe something you face so much when you're working on AAA productions, but there's a gap of confidence you'll hit when suddenly you don't have that boss man, that director, that client that tells you if it's good or no good, right? Like there's actually confidence in having that guide stone, right? On your own project, it's like the team is like, well, we made a thing, now what? When is it good enough? What is the timing? It's actually very uncomfortable for some developers, right? It's like, should we work on it another 3 months, 6 months? When is it done? When there's no one to tell you when it's done outside of like the finance guy, right? So that is not a technical skill, but it really requires experience to grow, right?
Yep.
Like there's no shortcut to that, I've noticed.
And speaking of confidence as well, my impression of Malaysia before 2015 was that, yes, we have a lot of great programmers and we have a lot of great artists, but we don't have enough people that can provide very good direction. I always felt that the three jobs that are missing in Malaysia is producer, director, and also writer, right? But not only Streamline Studios, but also Kaigan Games proved me wrong with the writing. When I played Sarah is Missing for the first time, like, my God, the writing is actually damn good. So Malaysia has writers as well. So yeah, that actually gave me a lot of confidence to start my own company.
I think producers, there's actually a lot of legacy from the animation industry and like the media agencies. There are a lot of talented people you'll find that are maybe not experienced in games just yet, but are very media savvy. So on that, there's a lot of background there, right? Like the animation industry has provided that to us. As for writing, I do agree. Like I was impressed with the writing by Kaigan Games, right? Like it's something where it's really hard to find any writers in the country, right? Like otherwise, it's impressive.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. But yeah, but I think for us, I mean, at least on the talent part on that for writing, right? It's like they're not readily available. Like you can't just go and pick. Okay, we need a games writer from around the region. I think it's for Southeast Asia. I think it's pretty similar in how it is. But it's like finding ways to adopt them. Like we have writers who write for books, right? Who write for cinema, who write for like TV dramas. And we have worked for all three of them, all three variations of these people. And we are like, hey, you have this really cool skill, but you need to like find a way to implement it and teach it and then into how to structure a game. So you need like somebody who intrinsically understands game development, which should be like us, right? Who are in the industry, like, hey, okay, we are the middle person to bring the art and tech together, and then guide this talent, this awesome talent that's all around the region. And also going back to the question just now was how transition from outsourcing to doing your own IP. Like for me, I think the scale is smaller, but we did start out. The original team was just me and my brother, and we were just doing outsourcing work for like nearly 5 years before we actually transitioned to do our own IP. So we used that. It's for me internally, I always tell like the team needs to level up, and literally like in my brain, in my gamer brain, is always like how you build your team in Baldur's Gate, right? Your band of adventurers in Baldur's Gate, then level up from level 1 to whatever, level 20 or whatever, right? So the more you do, the more games you do, the more experience you gain, you literally get better in making games. So that's how I still run the company, right? So when you started, it was just outsourcing because it just paid the bills, and you learn from every outsourcing project that we get. And when we were confident enough to do our own IP, we were like, I think this is the time, and we had the funds to burn. I know it was risky, but then we were like, if it's now or never, right? It's always a risk to think back. Like, wouldn't it be safer to just get another outsourcing project and just earn confirm cash for the next 1 year or whatnot, or like, yeah, just sit and burn those cash and see what comes out of it. I think that is a daunting decision, but for us, we always wanted to make our own IP. So it was just not an issue of like, should we do it? It's like when we should do it. And again, game development is already a high risk business, right? It's one of the, like, if you want to be in a safer business, you should do something else, right? It's already making games, it's already a high risk business. So you just try to mitigate the amount of risk, right? You have the cash to safely burn. Yeah, let's this is the time, and that's how we started doing on IP. And when we worked on Doctor Who: The Lonely Assassins, it was more like we had a set of products which matched what they wanted, and it just was a good fit. And we were like, it would be awesome for us. And for us also, the other thing that we believe in is like building IPs, continuously building the world, expanding the lore, like making the fans like really want more of it. And like the opportunity to work with something like the Doctor Who, which is going on for like God knows how long. It's like 40 to 50 years at this point, I guess. It's like, how do they do that, right? How do you have an IP which people just keep coming back to? I think that's pretty some amazing work by the team at BBC over there. But yeah, like for us, it was just, yeah, we want to learn more. We want to learn how you do it. And if the only way we learn is by doing a project with you guys, the co-production, yeah, we are all in for that, right? Yeah, so.
And I think that's also the reason why you really should be doing more and more of your own IP, right? Like you mentioned Doctor Who, being developed here. There's Balenciaga, which is like working with the French people we did, to make a fashion VR experience. Is kind of strange, right? But it shows that there's a huge demand, and that's because the consumers themselves want more experiences. So this is not the time, if you're talented, to just do, assets in some sense. Like go out there, try out something. Have a business plan, have infrastructure that surrounds you, but it is possible to find investment. It is possible to find somebody that can believe in what you're trying to do if you have the right combination of talent and experience, hopefully around you. So it isn't that risky if you're willing to put in the labor, right? I mean, going back to what Haz was saying about working together on Final Fantasy 15, the requirement more or less to come on board with Tabby, Hajime Tabata-san, we had a dinner with him. I think probably there was a lot of sake involved or something early on. More or less after Haz is like kind of vouched for us a little bit. We met the guy himself, and there was some analogy essentially, something like have you seen the movie The Last Samurai? There's like 100 people run up the hill and like 99 of them die. Right, that's what it's going to be to launch this game. Are you in? And we're like, let's have another sake. And then, hi, okay, let's do it, right? And that is still, I think, a good analogy what it takes to make your own games, right? Like that one, I think, was obviously on orders of magnitude bigger than probably what any of us really may want to launch, because it was a monster, right? But anyway, even a small game to launch that is hard, right? Because you got multiple platforms, multiple languages, age ratings, certifications, crazy platforms, timings, who's launching, what is launching. Oh my God, Cyberpunk is launching in the same months as you're launching. All of these things come to mind, right? So anyone that goes on that path, I salute them, because it is very, very challenging. But also right now, I think the right time to do it, right? So go forth and do that is my suggestion to them.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Malaysia as a whole, I've been with looking at developing the game industry even from the days in 1996. When Game Brains was still around. I don't know if you guys remember Game Brains at all.
Bread Baby.
Oh, yeah, man.
And if we're talking about leveling up, I think this is the best example. Having even when Streamline came here, and God bless Streamline, that they brought Malaysia to that next level. They were just like 3-4 guys here. I think Stefan and Alex came for one of our events, MDEC events in the early days called Creative, and then saw what Malaysia had to offer. They were probably the first guys who saw what talent Malaysia had to offer, and then grew from there. And I guess this is part of that even in those days, from our, and then this is me putting on my government hat, right? Mm-hmm. We knew that there needs to be experience first, opportunities first, before we can actually be able to make IP. And the governments always have resources that they need to bet on, right? They need to bet on either is the talent pool, or is it going to be the business, or is it going to be the market access, or is it going to be the content creation? And I think this is where we're happy to see people like Hazmer at that time, and Shah, be able to actually access those kinds of support to make them be able to do their in-house development, take a bit of that risk away from what they're doing, to actually be able to go out there and make those mistakes, I would say, right? And be able to do it. And hopefully they keep being able to make those mistakes and then make the best game ever, right? So even from our standpoint as PlayStation, it's simple. Like, we're here, we see the talent pool, we see the opportunities. We want to work together with all the outsourcing studios. We've been working with external studios here for quite some time already. And what we want to do is to work with the ecosystem, to actually uplift the ecosystem and be able to do this. I think recently Herman Hulst, the head of PlayStation Studios, actually told the press that there are going to be 25 new IPs being worked on right now in PlayStation. And that's just what's happening now. And what is the future? I think more and more, if we see the opportunities and capacity within Malaysia and the region rise up to the occasion, there'll be a lot of opportunities for us to actually look at the studios here and support the in-house development here. And I think that's going to be sort of our role also in PlayStation Studios Malaysia going forward.
No, that is that, I definitely thank the third-party team in Japan, Korea, and the US. At least those guys we worked with a lot. They helped us get our PlayStation 5 kits from Sony into the country and all that. So I don't know if Ian is related to those crews, but they moved a lot of maneuvers around, and then they showed up in Singapore, and then they came here and all this. So we worked all that out. So much appreciated getting that sorted. So definitely Sony is on the move, and is moving on average faster than some of the competitors, I think, which is nice to see that, right? And for us, in the same time zone, obviously, right? So it's always good to collaborate with those guys. So it's exciting to see where the future will go.
Yeah, I think echoing what Hasnul mentioned about experience and education. Yeah, I just want to bring up MDEC has, like everyone has said in this panel here, and MDEC has really helped everyone in a lot of places in giving us the resources to learn and be educated in the game space. I want to know how you guys have learned from your co-development partners. Are there tool chains or best practices that you've picked up from them and adopted to your team? Is there anything interesting that you'd like to share in that front? Maybe starting with Hazmer.
Oh, hello. Well, that was quite surprising. Okay. Well, I think Final Fantasy 15 was a giant IP to deal with. So I'm just going to talk about how I wouldn't say it's co-development per se, but how I learned from Square Enix that I established in Metronomik. I guess the first thing is that when you look at an IP as big as Final Fantasy, it takes quite a huge level of humility to admit at the time that Final Fantasy was not big, and that's what Tabby, Tabata Hajime, he mentioned, he was a director of FF15, and he told the whole team, look, Final Fantasy is no longer the top, man. What are we going to do about it? So that particular humility was what I brought to the company as well. We cannot assume that the game will be, making a lot of money and all that stuff. So we have to look at it from a producer's perspective, right? Like, will people really care about this game, right? For example, as a Malaysian company, it is very easy to just put in a lot of Malaysian cultures, and putting in, all sort of congkak and gasing or whatsoever. But one can go very easily self-indulgent, short sendiri, to the point that, it doesn't sell, and an average American might not care about your game, per se. So Final Fantasy 15 was always about, what if it's next to Witcher 3? Will people still buy the game? That's the whole concept. And all the pipeline, the tool chain is all connected to this particular concept, right? So Final Fantasy 15 was offering something that's different, like, for example, turning it into a road trip experience rather. So all the tools that were made for that, the pipeline that had to be changed because to deal with the open worldness of that, was to accommodate for the user experience at the end of the day that's relevant, right? So in Metronomik as well, when we created No Straight Roads, we have to make sure that every single thing that we do is for the purpose of making sure that the game is relevant. I cannot be too specific with what toolchain or pipeline that Square Enix did. I might get sued or whatever, but I mean that's the gist of it basically. Yeah, the importance of putting relevance into the picture is what changed a lot of what was happening around in the company, and that's how and that's why I adopted into Metronomik as well.
I can add to that a little bit, I guess. For our team working on Final Fantasy 15, I think the key takeaway is sort of like a high stakes, large scale production. How do you cooperate with that, right? Being in another location. It was great that we had Haz and several other of the Japanese developers here with us. Help to translate the tickets. What are we looking at? What are the issues that the Tokyo team is dealing with? I think the main thing that stuck out in that project is just the magnitude of it, right? Like, how do you coordinate dozens of people on both sides that are moving these big boats, and then course correction. Hey, it doesn't run on Xbox, or work on the demo instead, or there's a PlayStation bug, but it doesn't show up on the PC, all that stuff. Triaging all of this in real time while the clock is ticking every day. And the announcement date for the launch has been, this time it's actually happening, right? So you can't move it anymore. You don't get a chance.
They moved it once.
Yeah, they did. You don't get to operate on that scale on a lot of projects, not when it's that close to the wire, right? So that was interesting. I'm not sure all of our devs will agree because they work really hard hours. I think interesting is the word they would use.
They work really, really hard. It was really crazy. Brutal. Yes, brutal is a good word. Yeah.
But it was good. So we learned a lot of things from that. I guess other examples to mix it up a little bit. For example, another Square Enix project, Outriders, we've done recently, came out a few months ago. Our devs and designers who are on this, you learn a lot about just talking on a daily basis with their level design team, how are they structuring the encounters. That it's a third person kind of, collaborative online, but single player kind of campaign-based game. So that was really interesting. Unreal Engine, of course. Then now, of course, we're working on Lord of the Rings Gollum. So that is a very different kind of gameplay that you have to kind of adjust to. So that, again, is a different learning experience. Then working with Lorne Lanning and those guys, Oddworld, Soulstorm, right? Like, we helped build some of the levels and things like this.
Oh, I love that game. I mean, thank you, PlayStation, for the free game.
So there you get a lot of insights for the translating this kind of honestly smaller scale 2.5D, if you want to call it, that game, into this kind of much larger experience, right? And it's still 3D, 2D mix kind of thing. So that there's a lot you learn from that, right? And so I guess all of that kind of comes together, to form this knowledge at the studio. So that, I think, is really enjoyable for the devs. Maybe not necessarily when they're in a project knee deep, but afterwards they're like, oh, okay, we figured something out, right? So that's a nice feeling. So Shawn, did that kind of answer your question, I guess? Did we answer your question?
Yeah, sorry about that, Shawn.
No worries. Do you guys want to weigh in as well? Hasnul or Shawn?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about pipeline, I guess, right now ourselves, being a studio in Malaysia and sort of managing, sort of trying to build this thing up, it's not easy, especially in the time that we're in, right? We're all working from home, and the files we're pushing around are huge. So I think this is where a lot of things are changing. The future of work is changing. How we deal with external development and how we deal with our own internal studios will be different. We ourselves, we're studio number 13. There are 12 other studios within PlayStation Studios, like Insomniac, Naughty Dog. Everyone has a different pipeline. Everyone has a different platform, and we work with all of them. And again, this is the start of what we're doing in Malaysia right now. And really trying to figure out what is the best solution. Is it a hybrid solution, cloud-based solutions? I think these are things that, on the technical side, is something that a lot of studios will have to figure out, and are figuring out right now. And I know that Hazmer's team has been working from home since last year, March, and they're actually building a prototype right now of a game that's going to come out soon. So, those are things that are done outside of the studio. And how do you do that, especially now, in a better manner? because at the end of the day, creative and technologies, it's always best to see face to face. We're doing this online right now. It may not be the best way of getting ideas out. Hopefully we do get some ideas out, but that's not the best way. That's what I feel personally.
I guess this is a topic that wasn't on the questions, but it's a really good one, Hasnul. You know, how to kind of collaborate going forward. I think for us, actually, we'll continue being a hybrid model. You know, we've invested heavily into kind of IT infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. So we're in a pretty decent spot. And so we actually decided to just stay remote since actually also last year, March, right? Like I know some other studios were like kind of going back in and then MCO back out, then back in and then back out. Right now, it was never feeling quite safe for us to go back in. So there's a little bit going on at the studio, things that really we can't pull out, but the vast majority is outside. And I think, you know, there's a habit and a comfort that is evolving there that you're not going to kind of want to undo. You know, I think that there's a benefit in giving choice to go into the office, to meet people, you know, to kind of collaborate, sit around the table. But then, you know, also there are people that like, I just want to be alone and just for 3 days, just code away. And honestly, why not, right? Like that really works. And so that has changed a lot. It changed a lot of the dynamics on how we are looking at how teams are formed. You know, it opens up where you hire from, where teams are forming. And we're seeing this also already with our studio in the US, right? Like how there's a difference in like, where's the location and where can we hire from, right? So everything is going to be different. So if it feels a little foggy, I think that's something everyone just kind of has to get comfortable with. It's just the new normal, as they call it, right?
Shah also, right? You've been working from home since last month.
Yeah. Anyway, we tried to go back, I guess, a couple of months back, and then it's the MCO. Because I think, especially for making new IPs, I guess this might be a tangent, but I feel at least during pre-production, there needs to be some form of like, you sit in a room and you hash things out, because that's where you build the vision, right? And you need a coherent vision to move forward before you actually go enter production. So when we are moving into spoilers, Simulacra 3 right now, we were like, we need to figure out what it is going to be, right? Like we can't do that sitting at home. So we were trying to figure that out, and then So I think a hybrid model makes sense moving forward for most game companies. And I think that's what we're doing as well. And just to touch on, I think the like what we learned from co-production as well. I think another way for us, like what we benefited was, in a strange way, validation. In a sense, like what we have been doing thus far, does it actually measure up to what others have been doing? Like, is it an industry standard? Because we can't really like, hey, what have you been doing in your company? Like we can't really have that kind of conversations with other companies. But when you do co-production or you work with another company in the same project, and you're like, oh yeah, I think what we have been doing, it is okay. Like it's not really that far from what another AAA or another company has been doing. So I think that for us, the validation was important. So at least we know that it works, not just for us, but it is something that a more scalable company has done or is doing right now. So it gives us that kind of validation, which is important.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask more of a business question about Kaigan. Having shifted to Doctor Who, it definitely, I'm assuming it definitely has put like a hold on Simulacra 3. And if the Doctor Who project that they wanted you to work on was not in the same vein as like the missing phone genre, would you have taken that job also? Because then how do you like?
I know, I get it. Yeah, I think no. To be really frank about it, not really, because we have had other offers actually. I don't know, man. People keep pitching me dating games for phone simulators. And I'm telling there's been multiple pitches for like a dating game using a phone, which makes sense, but I really can't see myself or my team really being invested in such a project. I'm like, dude, I mean, if you want to do it, it's fine, but I don't think Kaigan will be comfortable doing something like that. But yeah, so I think it depends, I guess, for other companies. But for us, like if it really doesn't fit the vision of what we see like Kaigan to be, like for us is narrative and asking interesting questions and proposing interesting answers, I guess. So that is what we want to do and we'll keep doing. yeah, I think if it doesn't really fit into that mold, it might be tough for us, at least for me to like get my designers and like, you know, developers to be like, hey, be committed in this project which you have no passion or interest in, you know. But yeah, so we might not have taken it. And I think also another way to look at it is like, we have to balance, like, because a lot of people assume that only passion brings you through a production cycle for a game, right? Like, you're passionate people, yeah, developers are very passionate, but that passion can also burn out if they are not on the right project. So I think managing that is very important. And I think I actually saw this happen for Doctor Who, because when we hired them and when my team, they were with us for the past 3 or 4 years, they're like, yeah, we're building something unique to us, right? And I can put in my ideas and it will, you know, it will be real in the end of the game and when the game comes out. But for a co-production, that's not necessarily the case, because the vision is set by someone else and you follow that vision. And so for some creators, for some developers, artists, or even writers, they might not be that receptive for that kind of change in perspective. Like, they want like, oh, I have no say in how this IP moves forward or how this game turns out to be. And that might that does really put stress on how they function. And when like the project gets longer and longer, it really does lead to burnout. So yeah, finding a balance on that is pretty interesting. And I think there are literally types of developers and people in the industry who are like, yeah, I think I'm okay to work for other IPs and build a cool product for them, and compared to like, yeah, I'm just going to do my stuff and my IP. So I think finding a balanced team in that is also pretty cool.
Yeah, that transitions nicely into the next question, which is how does transitioning to a different business model kind of affect your team or team morale, right? Because they're the lifeblood of your company also. And I think you kind of answered that. So I think Stefan, this would, I think, apply best to you.
Sure. I mean, you know, in our team, we have 5 different brands, right? And the brands kind of crystallized because you have different people with different interests, different directions they want to grow into. And now for some folks, you know, they are going to tell you they're very comfortable working on something stable, predictable. I want to make 10 characters. I want to do 30 animations. That works great for them, right? Like, there's comfort in that. It'll get done. It'll show up in a game somewhere. They're very fine with this. For others, they become restless and they're like, I want to be creative, I want to try to take risks, try out new things, you know, but there is the problem. You might make things, they'll change endlessly, they will get canceled, you know, won't come out, you know, will go away. And the ambiguity of that, you know, where, you know, you deal with different kind of questions where it's like, oh, well, it doesn't feel fun, or it doesn't play well, or it doesn't look as cool as it should. Very kind of vague terms, you know, some people really don't like that, right? So you need to essentially find the right projects for the right people, right? Some people just want to churn through things, fact-based, get it done, don't care, cool. You know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, sometimes the clarity is really refreshing, right? But for other people, not so much. So that is kind of like what you have to do, right? And then the goal is to still raise, you know, all the teams up in terms of the complexity and the work that they're doing, just because otherwise they get automated away. So that, you know, that I think is the main thing you have to do. It's not like the culture is shifting underneath you as much as you shift the culture where the culture wants to kind of go towards, right? And you do it in a way where it lines up with the business that you want to have.
Cool. I think lastly, the last question I have is like, have the tables turned? Like, after having converted into a in-house development studio, developing your own IP, have you yourself, you know, acquired the help of an external outsourcing studio yourself? Have you engaged another outsourcing studio to help you on your personal project, on your company's project? I think Hazmer, you've probably had some experience on that, working on like, the straight roads.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No straight roads. Because our objective with Metronomik was to give opportunities to new people. So around 80% of our company are people who are just graduated from college or university, or even new to the game industry. One of the environment designers used to be an accountant and became an environment designer, you know. So obviously the other 20% is we're trying our best to teach the youngins, but at the same time as well, we thanks to our publisher sold out, the game got bigger. The scope got way bigger than what we initially predicted. So we sought the help of Passion Republic. For example, they did amazing work with the art and also the animation of some of the NPCs in the game and all that. And then the publisher, like, on one of those parties in Malaysia, it's like, hey, Hazmer, I think we need to make a Switch version. Like, what? I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, then we engaged Neobots from Taiwan also to make the Switch version of the game. And on top of that, obviously, we do lack a lot of people who know how to do proper QA as well. So we actually had Pull to Win from Singapore to help us with some of the localization of the languages and also the testing, because wow, the testing is amazing. They do really, really proper testing from compliance to localization even. Yeah. So I did not regret it at all. I mean, obviously I regret being told to make the Switch version 6 months before the release date. But apart from that, if it wasn't for the outsourcing companies, I wouldn't even call them outsourcing I would just call them development partners. Without that, then no Street Roads wouldn't happen. So as long as the publisher, make the Switch version, please, and then you have to counter it with, okay, then give me the money. If that happens properly, then I would recommend you to go for a co-development company if you do not have the means to do so. And it was good learning from them as well, from Neobots. Neobots actually kind of debugged our game as well. In a way, we saw a lot of holes thanks to them. And also, Pull to Win made us realize a lot of things. Like, for example, how about the PC? How about one person playing the keyboard and the other one with the controller? And we all like, oh, And obviously, Passion Republic covered so many things in the environment that couldn't be handled by us. So, no regrets at all doing co-development with them.
All right, so guys, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Thanks, Haz, Shah, Hasnul, Stefan.
Thanks, Shawn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.